Welcome back, everyone. Today we've got the final E-class for the semester. So we're going to talk a little bit about what practice looks like with individuals and families across the life course. Today's class is fairly short. We've just got a reading review to highlight some of the key areas that you should be familiar with. And then we're going to talk a little bit about practice with children and families, adults, and older adults. Okay, from your reading and by the time you finish this E-class, you should be familiar with the concepts of the contemporary family. So how families look today and their various variations, roles that we often take within the family, child maltreatment in terms of both the signs and the ways that we work with children who have experienced abuse, specialized services for adolescents in terms of some of the more specific practice areas that we focus on with adolescents, services for adults, signs of elder abuse, and then services for older adults. So last week we talked about a number of different practice areas that we might be involved in as social workers in terms of forensic social work, counseling for mental health concerns, family therapy, and things like that. And so this is an opportunity just for us to talk a little bit more specifically about the type of work we might do with children and families. So if we're working in the child welfare system, we're working in the courts, we will be working with children and their families. And these are some of the specific things that we focus on. Right, so we might be involved in terms of counseling families to find better solutions to their problems, whether this be in terms of just general functioning, whether this be due to the fact that they have been mandated to report to us from the court. So whatever this situation, we often work with families to help them function better and to help them make sure that all of the members of the family have a voice and are being cared for as they should. Often social workers have to be in the difficult position to remove children from abusive situations and place them in care homes. This may happen in the hospital in terms of kids who have been found to be, or the parents are showing signs of drug use. This may be in terms of doing home visits and assessments and removing the children based on the assessment. This may be also due to the police intervening and recommending such situations. Now, we also talked about last week about in terms of employment and housing and homelessness. Again, social workers be involved in that. We may be involved with one individual in the family who's struggling. For example, a vet. We may be involved with the whole family. We may be working with the children to help make sure they are getting the support they need to complete their studies and the food that they need, while also helping the parents find appropriate housing or employment and various options. We may be assisting pregnant women, adoptive parents, and adopted children to navigate the adoption system. For example, I've got a colleague who we went through our master's program together, and she specializes in adoption. And so she works with an organization that helps kids become adopted, so they negotiate the relationship between the potential parents and the children, helping to get the word out about kids who are in the foster care system who are eligible for adoption, coaching and educating the parents on what they need to do to be adoptive parents, and a lot of all of the kind of in between, making sure that they have appropriate housing, helping the kids make the transition, everything like that. As we talked about last week too, we may be involved in mental health work. We may be just acting as case management. We may be involved in advocacy efforts either with the individual or on behalf of the individual. For example, one of my colleagues from one of my previous jobs, I worked a hotline for older adults who may be experiencing elder abuse, and he was actually involved in working with the clients, the older adults who had been victims, helping to, he wasn't a lawyer, but he helped them navigate transportation and issues to get to court, provided support, coaching, and things like that when they then needed to be present for court. Again, we also help individuals who have been victims of intimate partner violence. We may be involved in running shelters. We may be involved in running nonprofits that provide support groups. We may be involved in really any number of situations. We may provide the counseling when they come in to report with the police. So again, social workers are really involved with children and families and individuals in a lot of different ways. Social workers are often involved in a variety, providing a variety of different types of services for youths and adolescents. And this may occur in various practice settings, whether it be in schools, it may be in terms of nonprofits or other organizations that work within the foster care system. It may also be in terms of their own private counseling or private practice. So some of the types of work that we do with youth and adolescents is around counseling for anxiety and depression, as well as adolescent suicide. As we know, teenage years can be very difficult. We're having more and more teens recognizing and being diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And as we continue to work to destigmatize mental health issues, the more social workers are involved in the process or the attempts to destigmatize mental health, but we're also involved in then providing that counseling and the support for adolescents who do experience mental health issues. We're also maybe providing support and programs for LGBTQ plus youth or those who might be questioning. This could be in a school setting. For example, as school social workers, we may sponsor or help support a gay-straight alliance within the school. We may develop a nonprofit in the community that provides resources and support or a safe place for youth to come to. Example, one of my colleagues, her research actually focuses on LGBTQ plus youth and the kinds of systems and support that they need in the community in order to not only survive, to make it through adolescence and the bullying they experience, but also to thrive and really figure out who they are and what they want to do in life. As social workers, we may also be involved around the issue of teen pregnancy. So for example, we may be involved in terms of counseling or talking with individuals who are at risk of teen pregnancy. For those who do become pregnant, we may be providing support groups or life skills groups. We may be working with nurses to provide them with training on how to support the baby, how to care for the baby after it's born. We may also be involved in terms of kind of case management and helping them get connected with resources that they need in order to support themselves and the baby in a healthy way after the baby is born. We may work with runaway or transient youths in terms of providing them with services, helping them get access to resources, particularly those who are interested in making the transition into housing and employment. We may be working with them around that. We may also be involved with youth around eating disorders in terms of providing counseling and support. And we may be many social workers work in the foster care system and are part of the team supporting kids as they age through the foster care system, and then especially at that vulnerable time when they age out of foster care. So helping to support them once they turn 18 and are leaving the foster care system, helping them be connecting to housing options, employment options, potentially future school options, and things like that. And so some of the additional areas that we would work would be social skills and competence. So helping any individuals, especially whether it be around like parenting skills, as we mentioned before, social skills in terms of, particularly youth who may have difficulty with this, how to better talk with individuals. We working around problem solving skills, especially with teen pregnancy or in terms of individuals experiencing mental health crises. How can we address the situation? What kind of skills do we need to give them to recognize the issue and act when they're feeling suicidal or things like that? We may be working with them around employment skills or life skills, how to balance a budget, how to search for jobs, how to develop a resume, and things like that. And we may also be involved in more of a community level and developing community programs to help vulnerable youth and adolescents if we see areas of need. So now let's talk a little bit about some of the services we might provide to adults, whether they be individuals or as part of a family. So we talked about last week again with the counseling. We may be providing individual or family counseling, depending on what the individual or the family needs, depending on what the issue is, whether they're sent to us from the court, whether they are voluntary and we're providing kind of marital or family therapy. Now, we might be involved with an individual or family around infertility counseling. We may also be helping them around genetic counseling and helping individuals understand kind of what their options are, potentially helping them through the grief process, especially if they've just found out from their doctor that they aren't capable of getting pregnant or that there will be some complications. We might be involved in terms of pregnancy and counseling in a variety of ways. We may be providing older adults with support and case management if they're acting as caregivers for their parents. So right now we've got a generation of older adults who's kind of, or adults who are what we'd call the sandwich generation, where they are raising children, but they are also caring for their aging parents. And that can be pretty stressful, right? Trying to take care of kids while also checking in on your mom and dad and making sure that they're doing what they need to do to stay healthy. This can also be particularly problematic for adults whose one or more of their parents is diagnosed with Alzheimer's or dementia or has or is becoming more cognitively or physically frail. We may also be involved in bereavement counseling, and this may be in terms of loss of a child, loss of a sibling, loss of a parent, or loss of a partner. We provide a lot of different kinds of counseling and grief and loss support as social workers. Some specialize just in terms of loss and grief for children. Some do a whole life course approach. There are a lot of organizations out there and social workers who provide counseling in this area. For example, one of my good friends, she just recently graduated with her MSW, and she organizes camps for children who have lost a parent. And so these camps happen a couple times a year, and the kids come together with support from herself as a social worker and then volunteers who are extensively trained to provide them with a safe space to talk about the loss of the one or more parents, to help them understand that they're not alone. They make friends with the other children who have also lost someone. And so those are just an example of ways that social workers work in terms of bereavement counseling. We may be involved in employee assistance. So we may be involved, depending on the level we work at, we may be doing benefits counseling. We may work for the Social Security Administration and be doing assessments. We may be working with individuals to improve their employability, whether it be resume development, life skills training, things like that we talked about last week. Social workers also can specialize and practice with the military. And so we have some social workers who, are on base or deployed who provide support. We also have many, many social workers who work with the VA, the Veterans Administration, in a variety of roles. They may be working in terms of counseling. They may be working around the issue of homelessness and vets who experience homelessness. They may be involved in counseling with substance abuse and things like that. And we said before, intimate partner violence. So we may be involved again in assessing that. We may be involved in providing the programs that support that. We may be counseling, particularly women, on their rights and access to various services and programs as victims of domestic violence. And so some of the specific skills we might look at and work on with adults might be around parenting skills, especially first-time parents. We might be working with them around financial literacy and planning. We may be helping them navigate the healthcare system, particularly if they're trying to take care of their parents and trying to figure out what Medicare insurance options are the best. If they're trying to get their parents enrolled in Medicaid, we might also be helping with that. We may just be helping them figure out what are the best healthcare options for them. If they're, for example, if their employer doesn't offer healthcare and things like that, we might also be working with them around their social competency skills and their problem-solving skills as well. Okay, and we're going to talk now about older adults. And so this is my area of interest. I will try not to be too long-winded. But first, we'll talk about elder abuse, which is an issue that's rampant throughout our country. And interestingly enough, it wasn't as recognized as child abuse, and it took a little bit longer to develop a definition and framework for addressing it. But there are now several recognized forms of elder abuse, and these include neglect. So this is refusing or failing to meet one's obligations or duties to a dependent older adult. So examples of neglect that I've seen in my practice are individuals who have difficulty caring for an older adult, or they're overworked. They often don't provide all of the services that the older adult needs, or they might give them, for example, we had one older gentleman, and his partner would give him less of a particular medicine that was a diuretic, because the individual couldn't handle taking him to the bathroom so much. And so that was harmful for him in terms of denying him that medication. It was neglectful, but the individual was doing it because they were overwhelmed and couldn't manage everything. And so part of our work was then to bring in additional services and supports, such as a part-time paid caregiver, as well as helping to set up with respite care so that the partner got a little bit of a break. And then there's also emotional or psychological abuse and physical abuse. And these are what you would think in terms of physical abuse, so hitting or otherwise confining an older adult, harming them. Emotional or psychological abuse in terms of harming or causing emotional anguish or pain through verbal and nonverbal insults. This often happens again when an older adult and their caregiver is kind of overwhelmed, or is someone who should not be in the position to be taking care of that older adult. We also see this occasionally at nursing homes or adult day centers, so settings where it's not a family member who's providing the care, but it's a paid staff member who again is often overworked and underpaid. And some of the more horrific stories have been in terms of leaving an older adult who has had an incident in terms of they've gone to the bathroom on themselves, and the care staff would just leave them there for hours. Even though they knew that they refused to take them and get them cleaned up and things like that as a way to punish them for having the accident. There is also financial exploitation, which happens quite a bit to older adults. They are often victims of scams in particular, but this can also happen in terms of family members. They often, what I saw in terms of this was a family member who would live with the older adult and would take money from them, or would not give them access to all of their Social Security benefits or money when it came in, and things like that. And then the final one that you see a lot is self-neglect. And so these are older adults who, through a desire either to stay independent or who are having some kind of mental health issue, actually neglect themselves. And so this can be in terms of not taking medication that they should, not cleaning themselves as they should, even though particularly for ones who are physically capable of doing this. And that's usually a sign that they are experiencing depression or having some kind of mental health issue. We also see the neglect, particularly in the form of hoarding. Hoarding among older adults is an issue that's been getting a lot of attention over the years because it kind of causes an ethical dilemma for social workers because we promote the idea of self-determination, and we recognize an older adult's right to not have their house as clean or sanitary as we would necessarily clean it. But we also then have to make the choice of intervening and potentially having them move to assisted or nursing homes, depending on their financial ability. If if the hoarding gets so bad that it is truly unsanitary and unsafe for them. Now, other areas that we might be involved in with older adults in terms of benefits counseling. So, as older adults approach the age of 65 now and 67 later and make the transition from their employment health benefits to Medicare, we may be helping them understand what their options are, what they want in terms of the various plan options, whether or not they want a Part D and to get medication coverage and things like that. We may be helping them access community resources. So for older adults, one of the big areas as gerontological social workers that we focus on is helping older adults to stay living in their homes for as long as possible. This is often referred to as aging in place. And the main reason we do this is because older adults, by and large, report preferring to stay in their own homes as long as they're capable. Now, there are times when we have to do the assessment and have to help them make the decision to either move into an assisted living community or often help their family members decide on an appropriate nursing home setting. So, again, we may be involved in accessing community resources. We may be helping get them signed up for benefits. So, for example, some of our lower income seniors, we might be helping them sign up for and be part of the LIHEAP program so that they can get reduced heating and electricity costs. We may be helping sign them up for SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Program. And we may be looking at what other services or things they might qualify for under the Older Americans Act in terms of reduced cost services, Meals on Wheels, and things like that. We may also be involved in home assessments. So we may go in, for example, and be assessing the home in terms of alterations that can be made to make it more livable or safe for them. So we may be, for example, some of the home assessments that I've done, we look at rugs on the floor and whether or not these are secure, because that's a major fall hazard for older adults. We look at the stairs to see whether or not they have a secure railing, because again, that's a major fall hazard. We explore the kitchen to make sure that all of the fixtures work and that they work appropriately. We look at the bathrooms to see whether or not the older adult needs grab bars or something else that will allow them to transition on and off the toilet independently. We may also help them negotiate getting, for example, a shower chair or alterations to the shower so that they don't have to step in and out of the tub, which again is a major risk for falls for older adults. Now, older adults who do come into the hospital, we as social workers, again, we talked about the healthcare and hospital social work in the previous week, but we may be involved specifically around doing planning with older adults and their families. So we may be helping them understand their medications that they're on. We may be helping them connect to or get in place, arrange transportation to get to the doctor for their follow-ups. We may be working with the community groups to go in and do these home assessments to make sure that things are needed or are in place so that they can live at home safely. We may also be involved in terms of working, to help them get ramps or things like that if they are now using a walker. Anything that in the home that we can alter to make it more livable for them. And the other big area that social workers are involved in is the area of community engagement. And this is actually what my research and agenda focuses on. I'm particularly interested in volunteerism and civic engagement for older adults, particularly older adults with disabilities. And this is because being connected and being engaged in meaningful activities with others has a wide range of health benefits, both physical and emotional health benefits. So, for example, particularly being involved in volunteerism has been shown to reduce the risk of developing disabilities. It improves physical activity. It improves cognitive functioning. It can improve overall health and well-being, and it's particularly helpful for emotional health and providing older adults with a sense of purpose. Unfortunately, older adults with disabilities don't get the same opportunities to participate as older adults without disabilities. So my work really focuses on how we make communities and organizations more accepting and inclusive of older adults, particularly those with physical disabilities, so that they can participate. And so some of the final areas that we might work with older adults are in terms of day centers. So this might be, for example, in terms of PACE, the Program for All-Inclusive Care for the Elderly, where older adults come for the day, or it could be at a senior center where we provide services for the day, including a meal. That was actually one of my first jobs as a social worker, was working at a senior center. We would provide activities throughout the day that older adults could be involved in. And, everything from exercise classes, reminiscence groups. We had a Wii Fit area so that they could do bowling or play tennis with the Wii Fit. We also provided lunch and other activities. Many social workers work in nursing homes, and this is from the base level of providing services up to administration. There are also obviously nurses who are heavily and doctors heavily involved in this, but social workers provide a lot of the socialization planning, a lot of the care planning, and running of the kind of day-to-day activities to help keep residents engaged. We also are involved in hospice care, and so helping those who are at the end of their lives live comfortable and have a more comfortable and meaningful death as part of our charge as hospice care workers. And we're also involved in end-of-life planning, and this may happen at nursing homes or at day centers, but it's an area that social workers often receive special training in terms of helping to navigate that conversation with the older adult, as well as their children and any grandchildren. in terms of, what the older adult wants the end of their life to look like. Do they want hospice care? Do they want to die at home? Things like that. We also help them through decision making in terms of who's going to be their power of attorney, who's going to be able to make the medical decisions for them at the end of their life, who is going to be the executor for their will. So we help them navigate that relationship with lawyers and around this, all of the legal matters that they kind of need to put in place. We provide counseling in terms of what they will do with their property and help them, again, connect with those lawyers in terms of whether or not they plan to pass their home on to their children, whether or not they want to sell it, all of those things we may be involved with as social workers. All right, so that's the end of our last e-class. You've got a couple of things coming up. I've moved some of the due dates back just to give you a little more time and a little more flexibility. So make sure you check the assignments to see when everything is due. But we've got our Journal 3, our Milestone 2 check-in, the final milestone check-in, Quiz 2, and you should be, if you're not working on your call to action projects, you should be in the next week or so. Again, look at the example ones that I put in the file for the last module to give you some ideas. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, please email me.